Alex, 22, woke up at 7 in the morning to give Rachel, his wife whom he married 2 years ago, a little pleasant surprise hot cocoa or a latte, depending on her mood. As he silently made his way into the kitchen, outside the window there was a view of a quiet street in one of the neighborhoods of northwest Chicago. The street is quiet, with rare passers-by and cars only occasionally disturbed the morning peace. At such moments, Alex liked to think about how wonderful it was to live with his beloved wife, to feel needed. He put the Turk on the stove and muttered in a low voice, "Today will be a great day, much better." No one answered him in response. Rachel was still sleeping, but he knew that the smell of milk and coffee would soon become a kind of alarm clock for her. They had been married for 2 years, and although that may seem like a short time to some, Alex felt that in those 2 years, he and Rachel had managed to create an almost perfect union. Friends said that they looked like a picture together: romantic evenings, mutual support, ease of communication. And it seemed to them that everything was simple and natural, as if it should be so. Rachel stretched and slowly walked out of the bedroom, dressed in a thin dressing gown. "Good morning," she said in a quiet, not yet fully awake voice. "You got up early again, didn't you?" "I wanted to check the mail," he responded and smiled, "and cook something tasty." She came closer, ruffling her hair, still disheveled from sleep, with her hand. "Thank you. I love waking up when you are already on your feet and have taken care of everything." Alex gently touched her shoulder. "In our family, my mother always did this for my father, so I decided to continue the tradition." Soon they were already sitting at the table. For breakfast, fried toast with cheese and ham, as well as a glass of orange juice. Alex had a weakness for toast, and Rachel preferred cereal with yogurt, but today she decided to support him. The moment they reached out for the plate together, their fingers touched, and they smiled at each other as if it was the first week of their relationship. "How are things at work?" Rachel asked, taking a sip of her drink. "So far so good," Alex replied. "The boss said that he sees potential in me. Hopefully, this means a salary increase soon. I wish we could save something for the future. You know, I often think about children." "Me too," she nodded, looking down. "But let's wait a little. I still haven't found a job yet, and we would like to strengthen the financial side." "I understand," he admitted. "I want to make you feel more confident." Rachel smiled. "Thank you. I wish we had a little more stability. I'm just sending out my resume now. Yesterday, I applied for a vacancy at a news agency. There are very interesting projects there. I could write a column there or check facts." "You'll do great," Alex encouraged her. "Do you remember how at the university even the teachers praised your articles?" "Thank you, honey," she said warmly. "This gives me hope." After breakfast, they agreed that in the evenings, when Alex returned from work, they would look at new vacancies together and write competent cover letters. In his heart, Alex already imagined how Rachel would go to work for a large publishing house and eventually become a famous journalist. Meanwhile, he will climb the career ladder in his consulting company. This is how their days passed. They made plans for the future, discussed how in a year they might think about children. Sometimes on Fridays, they went to their favorite Italian restaurant, where they ate pasta, drank wine, and talked for hours about their lives, laughing together at sweet memories of their student times. At these moments, Alex felt boundless harmony, which he never wanted to lose. He would not have believed it if he had been told that very soon an unexpected storm would burst into this harmony, and the first ripples on the water would appear from where no one expected. On one of these evenings, when they were sitting at a table in a half-empty restaurant, Rachel suddenly started talking about her long-standing dream of traveling to Europe for several months and doing a series of reports. Alex enthusiastically began discussing how great it would be to travel together. They exchanged ideas, laughed, and the waiter, hearing their conversation, said, "Great plan, guys. Europe is cool," Alex replied, looking at Rachel. "We have our whole life ahead of us, and I want it to be bright, filled with such trips." Rachel smiled, squeezing his hand tighter. "Me too." An ordinary evening, Alex came home tired but happy. Evening Chicago was glowing with lights, and thoughts about the next work project were spinning in Alex's head. He was looking forward to having a quiet dinner with Rachel and maybe watching a TV series. But as he opened the door, he heard Rachel shouting to him from the kitchen. "Alex, come in quickly, I need to talk to you." There was something exciting in the voice. Alex entered the kitchen and smelled the aroma of seafood pasta. Rachel turned off the stove, set the pan aside, and looked into his eyes. "I have important news. I met an old friend. More precisely, a classmate from college. His name is Steve." Alex smiled slightly. "An old friend? And where did you meet him?" "At the coffee shop," Rachel explained. "I was just walking past. I saw a familiar face. I decided to come in and say hello. But it turned out that he is now in a terrible situation. I was laid off at work. There was almost no money and no housing. He's so upset, I couldn't just turn around and leave." Alex frowned. "So, he's looking for a place to spend the night?" "Not just to spend the night." Rachel sat down on a chair. "He really has nowhere to live. He is now staying with some friend who is expecting guests in a couple of days. So Steve urgently needs another place. I thought, we have a small guest room. I know it's inconvenient, but..." Alex already understood what she was driving at. "Do you want to invite him to stay with us?" "Yes, just for a while," Rachel said. "He will look for work, get out of his hole. I just feel sorry to leave him at such a moment. He was always a good person. Even in college, he helped me with articles." Alex shook his head. A feeling of anxiety pricked his chest, but he was not used to refusing when it came to basic help. "Well, if it's really not for long, let him live. But let's discuss the timing right away. We ourselves are not very comfortable in a two-room apartment." "I understand," Rachel nodded, jumping out of her chair and hugging Alex. "Thank you. I knew you would help." That's how Steve came into their lives. The next day, Alex drove his car to the agreed-upon coffee shop to pick up the guy and take him to them. When Steve got into the car, Alex looked at him appraisingly. Tall, dark-haired, tired-looking, with circles under his eyes. Steve tried to smile. "Hello, Alex. Thank you for agreeing to help." "No problem. I heard you're going through a difficult period right now. I hope you get back on your feet." Steve took a deep breath. "I hope so myself. Just some bad luck. But I'm looking for a job, so I'm not going to sit on your neck." When they arrived at the apartment, Rachel ran out into the hallway to say hello. She quickly hugged Steve and patted him on the shoulder in a friendly manner. Alex looked away and said to himself, "It's okay. It's just the joy of meeting an old friend." Steve placed his few bags against the wall and smiled gratefully. "I didn't think I'd have to go down like that. But I promise not to stay too long. Will you look at the room?" Rachel suggested. "I cleaned it there and prepared the mattress. It's not all gorgeous, but at least there's some angle." "Thank you, that's more than enough," Steve replied. Alex stood to the side, watching as they walked into the room. He thought Steve seemed like a decent and clearly devastated guy. Why should he be jealous or worried? He and Rachel have a strong marriage, and this man needs help. Alex himself once received support from friends, so he saw no reason to refuse. Nevertheless, something inside him was alarming, although he could not really understand why. "How about we have dinner together?" Alex asked a little later. "I can cook the chicken in the oven, and you can peel the potatoes." Steve readily agreed. Over dinner, they talked about the past, about how Steve and Rachel studied together in the same stream. Alex listened to the story about fun student days, but noticed that Rachel was looking at Steve a little longer than at a simple acquaintance. Or did he imagine it? "Do you remember how you and I wrote an article for the student newspaper?" Rachel asked Steve. Of course, Steve grinned. "Then you took a very bold topic and even criticized the college administration. And I was almost kicked out of the editorial office for these harsh language." Rachel picked up, narrowing her eyes slyly. But the article received a response. "Yes," Steve nodded. "I realized then that you can become a real journalist who is not afraid to tell the truth." Alex, trying not to look jealous, just put a piece of chicken in his mouth and quietly grinned. He wanted to look at it from the outside. Two old friends share memories, and he, Alex, is glad to hear what a persistent journalist his wife was already as a student. And yet, within a couple of seconds, he had the strange impression that there was something else hidden behind these memories. He quickly pushed these thoughts aside and decided that he was tired after work. At the end of dinner, Steve put away the dishes, thanked him for the hospitality, and said that he would go to rest. Alex and Rachel were left alone in the living room. "See," she said to Alex, "he once helped me a lot and advised me on various topics, and now he himself found himself with nothing." "Yes, I feel sorry for him," Alex nodded. "Okay, I hope he finds a job quickly and everything gets better." "Of course," Rachel whispered and ran her hand through his hair. "Thank you again." A couple of weeks have passed. Steve lived with them and continued to look for work, but without much success. He got up in the morning, looked through advertisements, called potential employers, got dressed, and went to interviews. Sometimes he returned with hope. Sometimes he returned depressed and angry at the whole world. Alex, heading to the office, saw Rachel staying at home and Steve sitting in his room at his laptop, politely saying goodbye to Alex. During the day, while Alex was at work, Steve and Rachel spent a lot of time together. Alex thought that this was normal. She helped him write his resume, looked for suitable jobs, and sometimes they went shopping together or just walked if Steve didn't have interviews. However, over time, Alex began to catch himself thinking that the mood in their apartment had changed. The look with which Rachel sometimes looked at Steve no longer resembled what happens between old friends. A couple of times in the evening, Alex suddenly woke up and heard whispers in the corridor. Judging by the voices, it was Steve and Rachel. He got out of bed and thought, "Should I go see what's there?" But each time he decided that he did not want to look like a jealous husband, capable of causing scandals out of the blue. "Steve can't sleep," Rachel justified in the morning when Alex brought it up. "I went out to drink water. He also ended up in the kitchen. We were just talking about his unsuccessful interview." "Okay," Alex said, trying not to show his doubts. "But why is it so quiet?" "I didn't want to wake you," Rachel shrugged. "Everything is fine." Alex pretended that this was enough for him, but his inner restlessness grew. It seemed to him that Steve was acting more and more relaxed. He began to take care of himself more carefully than in the first days he shaved and bought new hair gel. Even the way she spoke to Rachel took on a flirtatious tone, at least that's how Alex saw it. One afternoon, after returning early from work, Alex found Steve and Rachel in the living room. They watched a selection of funny videos on their laptop. Rachel laughed loudly and naturally, and Steve, sitting next to him, also burst into laughter. When Alex walked in, they both looked at him and stopped talking. Rachel said quietly, "Hello, are you home yet? How so?" "Yes, today is a shortened day," he explained, looking around at them. "Are you having fun?" "Yes, that's right, roller skates." Steve waved him off. "I thought it would be a distraction after yet another refusal from the company." Rachel added, "Yes, I decided to cheer him up. We watched stupid stand-up acts." Alex felt like he looked like a stranger in his own living room. He put the folder with papers on the table and asked, "Maybe I should take a look too." "Of course," Rachel replied, moving her laptop so Alex could get closer. "It's just that the humor here is a little specific. We're already in the middle." "Well, I'll get into it somehow," he said and sat down next to me. He tried to laugh with them, but he felt as if they were sharing some kind of atmosphere into which he was not fully admitted. When the video ended, Alex stood up and said, "I'll go get changed. Maybe we can order pizza later." "Great idea," they said in one voice. Everything looked peaceful, but doubt flared up in Alex's chest. A few days later, an episode occurred that increased Alex's anxiety. He heard voices from the kitchen again late at night. Plucking up courage, he left the bedroom and saw the same picture: Rachel and Steve sitting in dim light, talking. When they saw Alex, they fell silent, and the first thing Rachel said was, "Sorry, did we wake you up?" "Steve is just upset. The third interview has already failed." Yeah, said Alex, barely containing his irritation. Okay, I wanted to drink water. He poured a glass of water, took a couple of sips, and returned to the bedroom. Rachel soon arrived too, sat on the edge of the bed, and extended her hand. Sorry that this happened. He simply cannot find a job. I try to somehow console him. I understand, Alex said, closing his eyes. Maybe he should go back to his parents or somewhere else, or go to another city. No, Rachel sighed. He had at least some chance here. I believe he will settle down. Be patient a little, okay? Alex had no choice but to nod. But more and more questions appeared in my soul. Why exactly should she comfort Steve at night? Where is the line between friendship and something more? Is there a serious problem in their family life? Alex didn't want to stress himself out, but he couldn't ignore the growing feeling of jealousy. Soon another event happened. Alex returned early in the day and went into the hallway. The door to their bedroom was slightly open, and he heard muffled voices there. As he got closer, he saw Steve standing in front of the closet and Rachel searching for something inside it. They both jumped when Alex entered. Oh, Alex said, trying to hide his confusion. What are you doing here? Rachel turned around sharply. Don't scare me like that. I was looking for a folder with my old resume. I wanted to show Steve how it's structured there. And you didn't find it? Alex forced himself to smile. No, Steve muttered, looking embarrassed. It's just a matter of seconds, but we didn't want to make any noise. Alex didn't say anything, just nodded and stepped back. He felt something unpleasant in his chest, as if a spring of suspicion was twisting inside him. Here it is, he and Rachel's bedroom is a secret place where there are no strangers, and now Steve is there. They were clearly not caught in an unambiguous position, but the very fact of their being together in the intimate area caused Alex's brain to throw up the darkest thoughts. In the evening, when Steve went to his place, Alex asked Rachel, "You know, I don't like all this. The two of you are often together. I sometimes feel out of place in my own home." "This is your house," Rachel looked at him with slight offense. "And mine too. And we have Steve temporarily. We are just trying to help him. Yes, I spend time with him because he is desperate. Your friends once helped you too, remember?" "I remember," Alex nodded. "But I didn't have the wives of these friends who would spend their nights in the kitchen with me." Rachel clasped her hands. "Well, you're exaggerating. We're not doing anything wrong, we're just talking. Understand, he is a person close to me. We have been friends for many years. You don't want me to ignore him, do you?" Alex ran his hand over his face. "No, I don't want to. I don't want to lose you." She came closer and hugged him. "You won't lose it. I love you. Understand, these are all empty suspicions." She sounded convincing in words, and Alex really wanted to believe her. They spent that night together, trying to forget about the tension, but the alarm bell kept ringing in Alex's head. What if something is already happening, and I'm just turning a blind eye to it? Over time, these thoughts only intensified. He caught the glances that Steve and Rachel seemed to exchange behind his back. I noticed small details. A cup with a cat print, Rachel's favorite mug, stood next to Steve's laptop as if she had given him permission to use it, and she had never given this mug to anyone before. Or the fact that they were making pizza together, laughing in the kitchen, and he, Alex, walked in and felt that the room had its own atmosphere in which he didn't quite belong. A couple of times Alex suggested that his wife go somewhere together, but either Steve felt bad, and Rachel said that she couldn't leave him, or suddenly Alex was stuck at work, and Rachel went out with a friend. Gradually, the romantic evenings faded away. Alex still loved Rachel, but felt that they were growing apart, and realizing this made him feel uneasy. When the tension reached a certain point, Alex decided to talk to her frankly. "Listen, Rachel," he said quietly, closing the bedroom door behind them. "It seems to me that something is going on between you and Steve. Or at least hints at what will happen. I see it all. Late-night conversations, running, spending time together." "Alex," she interrupted, placing her hand on his chest. "There is nothing like that. I love you, and he is just a friend who is now experiencing a tragedy in his life. I cannot refuse a person comfort. I don't want to be a tyrant who drives out the helpless, Alex sighed heavily. But this situation really worries me. I understand. Let's then recommend something together for him. Push him with his job search so that he can find housing sooner. But please don't look at him like he's a monster or a seducer. I'll try, Alex promised. They hugged and Rachel cuddled up to him. I'm sorry we're in this situation, but I assure you everything will be fine. Alex wanted to believe her. He hoped that in a little more time Steve would find a job, move out, and their lives would return to normal. But in the depths of his soul, some signals haunted him, reminding him that everything was no longer the same as it was. And even though there was no clear evidence of betrayal yet, trust began to crack. The following days were no different. Steve continued his search, sometimes leaving for half a day, returning in an elevated or depressed mood, depending on the results. Rachel was also left without a permanent job, but they both had plenty of time to communicate. Alex returned home and sometimes felt like he and Steve were having an animated conversation or watching a movie. Everything seemed within the bounds of decency, but he couldn't help but think that they had become closer than just neighbors. One evening, when Steve left for an interview and Rachel was home, Alex began. Maybe today we can go to a restaurant together. With pleasure, she smiled. I'll just take a shower. Alex felt a slight relief because he missed such evenings. But before he could rejoice, Steve returned much earlier than expected, looking upset. He threw his bag in the corridor and said that everything had gone wrong for him again. Rachel immediately began to console him, and when Alex asked, "Well, then we'll still go," she answered. "Maybe let's move it to tomorrow. He's in such a state now that I don't feel comfortable leaving him alone." Alex felt a lump in his throat, but he didn't want to make a scene. He just nodded, realizing that their dinner was being postponed again. Perhaps a trifle, but taken together with everything else, it cut his heart deeply. That night he had troubled dreams in which he saw Rachel walking somewhere hand in hand with Steve, and he couldn't catch up with them. Waking up in a cold sweat, Alex decided that he needed to be on his guard. He no longer perceived the situation as harmless. There was a tension in the air, completely different from their previous calm family life. For now, all three of them continued to live under the same roof. Alex noticed that Rachel and Steve were looking at each other with some expression that was difficult to explain. Maybe it's just friendly empathy, or maybe something more. Alex didn't know for sure, but his premonitions told him that an inevitable explosion was coming, and the first bells of this explosion were already ringing louder. He tried not to put pressure on Rachel, but he couldn't smile sincerely anymore. In his conversation with Steve, he was polite, even in a friendly way interested in the progress of the search, but emotions were seething inside. Before going to bed, he often lay awake, listening to his wife's breathing and wondering how she felt. Is she thinking about the children and their future together, or about anything related to Steve? Alex woke up at the usual time, feeling groggy and slightly nervous. The night before, he had thought a lot about how tense the atmosphere in the house had become over the past weeks. After an unpleasant conversation with his wife the day before, he could not sleep peacefully. However, today he had an important working day ahead of him. He had to go to the main office of the company to present his project to management. Alex desperately wanted to get his boss's approval and the promised promotion because all this could symbolize a new chapter in his life. He dressed in a formal suit, checked the papers in his briefcase, and looked at his watch. It was still early, but he decided to leave early to collect his thoughts in the car, slowly drive to the office, and calm down. In the kitchen, he saw Rachel, who looked tired and as if distracted by something. She put the kettle on, but when she saw her husband, she just nodded at him, not trying to start a conversation. "Good morning," Alex said quietly, leaning his hand on the doorframe. "Uh-huh," Rachel responded, looking down. He wanted to ask how she was feeling, but he remembered their last quarrels and decided not to aggravate the situation with new questions. He was well aware that things had changed dramatically in recent weeks. The family idol collapsed, and a shadow of jealousy and mutual reproaches hung between them. The reason for this was Steve, who once appeared in their lives only as a temporary guest. However, events soon took a dangerous turn. Alex left the house, got into the car, and exhaled quietly, turning on the ignition. There was a coil of tension inside him that he couldn't loosen. It seemed to him that he needed to concentrate on work and try to solve family problems a little later. He drove the car towards the office and turned on the radio to escape from heavy thoughts. When Alex reached the company parking lot and began shuffling papers before heading to his meeting with executives, he felt something was missing. He reached into his briefcase and realized the most important folder with documents, which contained all the graphs, calculations, and conclusions for his project, was missing. This was a serious omission, because without these documents, he would not be able to fully present the idea. Alex mentally cursed. Leaving the car in the parking lot, he decided there was still enough time he could return home and have time to pick up the folder and then rush back to the office. He called his boss and said that he would be delayed for a maximum of half an hour due to a problem with documentation. The manager was not particularly enthusiastic about this, but allowed Alex to move the performance to a later slot. Alex felt a little relieved, thanks at least to the fact that he still had a chance to save the situation. He quickly drove back, trying to avoid the traffic jam. Thoughts about his family popped into his head again. He understood that a temporary respite in the relationship could end in failure if something decisive was not done. Was he going to forgive Rachel for all the recent weirdness and ambiguity with Steve? Or has their love long since exhausted itself, and he is only clinging to the ghost of past happiness? Alex asked himself these questions and did not find a clear answer to them. When he parked at the house, his heart was pounding. He tried to compose himself, reminded himself that he had only come for a minute, took an important folder, and rushed back. Logically, Rachel should have stayed at home because she had no urgent business in the morning. He ran up the stairs to the second floor, opened the door, and immediately went to the living room, where he usually left his documentation on the table. But passing by the bedroom, Alex suddenly noticed something strange with his peripheral vision. He stopped and listened. Behind the slightly open door, quiet groans and the rustling of clothes could be heard. Alex held his breath and pushed the door lightly. What he saw shocked him. Steve and Rachel were locked in a kiss, half naked, clinging to each other. Their faces glowed with passion, and their hands wandered over their bodies, leaving no doubt that this was not just a friendly hug. "What the—" Alex squeezed out, looking at them with wide eyes. Steve pulled back, and Rachel jumped back towards the bed, trying to pull the blanket over herself. Alex felt a volcano of anger explode inside him. Everything he had been afraid of in recent weeks now appeared before him in naked form, shocking him to the core. My heart began to beat wildly, and my ears began to ring. "Alex," Rachel exclaimed, grabbing the sheet. It's... Damn," Steve muttered, backing away. "It's not what you think." Alex clenched his fists, feeling the rage rise from his chest to his throat. "Not what I think?" "Yes, you bitch. You kiss like lovers." His voice broke. Steve threw up his hands, trying to justify himself. It happened by accident." He looked scared. "I wanted to talk. Things have gone too far." "Sorry, But Alex didn't hear him anymore. Primal anger awoke in him, like an avalanche ready to destroy everything in its path. He took 2 quick steps forward and punched Steve in the jaw. He staggered and fell to his knees, but Alex didn't stop. More blows followed. Steve tried to defend himself, covering his face with his hands, begging him to stop, but Alex was blinded by jealousy and betrayal. "Alex, please stop," Rachel shouted, rushing towards him and trying to pull away her husband's hand. "You can kill him." Alex turned to her with blazing eyes. "Move away. Do you even understand what you're doing?" She grabbed his shirt, begging him not to hit Steve. But Alex pushed Steve in the chest again, causing him to slam his back into the bedside table and hiss painfully. Blood was flowing from his broken lip, and a huge bruise was already visible on his cheekbone. Steve's entire appearance suggested that he was incapable of defending himself against Alex's rage. I, Steve wheezed, I really didn't want to. I didn't want to do that. Are you justifying your pathetic meanness? Alex roared, raising his fist again. Are you saying that this is an accident? Rachel begged for it to stop. Alex, listen, we made a mistake. Please, please calm down. But he was carried along by the current of wild rage. For several moments he stood over the prostrate Steve, breathing heavily, and thought only of one thing. These people he trusted had destroyed everything he had. Suddenly, at the sight of Steve's blood and groan, a terrible thought came to Alex's head. What if he was imprisoned for beatings? He didn't want to end up behind bars, but the feeling of acute hatred and the desire to punish the traitor overpowered common sense. I'll call the police, Alex muttered through his teeth, looking at his wife. Do you know what I will tell them? What? Rachel asked, tearful, her eyes wide with fear. Alex said with quiet fury. I will say that he tried to have sex with you without your consent. Yes, that's it. And let him now remain in the role of a defenseless victim. No, this is... Steve began, but Alex didn't let him finish, pushing him with his foot. Shut up, Alex growled, taking out his phone. Stop pretending to be a saint. Rachel waved her hands in horror. Alex, no, don't do this. She rushed to him, but he was already dialing 911. Be quiet, Alex said, pressing the device to his ear. Hello, police? Urgently. Then a man broke into the house and tried to attack and force my wife to have sex. I'm holding him back. Help is needed immediately. He announced the address loudly. At the other end of the line, they promised to send an outfit. Alex then disconnected and looked at Rachel. She put her hands to her mouth. What have you done? What you need, Alex answered. Now let that bastard get what he deserves. Steve no longer tried to get up. He looked broken and scared. Blood was flowing from a cut eyebrow, and the sleeve of his shirt was torn. In a voice that was becoming hoarse, he said, You can't. That's a lie. Rachel, tell him. But Rachel stood at the table, clutching the edge of the sheet. When her gaze met Alex's, he saw panic and despair in them. In deathly silence, she nodded slightly, as if making it clear that she would play along with her husband. Perhaps she hoped that this way he would forgive her, and they would save the marriage. Steve closed his eyes. Crap. Have you both gone crazy? Alex turned away, picking up his folder from the floor. Now he no longer cared what methods he used to destroy Steve. The main thing is to vent all the accumulated rage. And then he realized that for the rest of his life, he would no longer be able to look at Rachel as a loved one. The scene of betrayal stood before my eyes like a terrible nightmare. A few minutes later, the sound of sirens was heard. The door to the apartment swung open, and the police entered the hallway. Alex quickly explained the situation to them, pointing to the bloodied Steve. This man attacked my wife. I returned and found him trying to rape her. I pulled him away, he began to resist, but seemed no longer dangerous. One of the policemen knelt over Steve, ordering him not to move. He indignantly tried to explain that everything was a lie, but no one believed him. The second police officer took Rachel aside and began asking her if she supported the charges. Alex saw her tremble, looking at the floor, and then quietly, almost inaudibly answer, Yes, he attacked me. Steve was picked up and handcuffed. He shouted that it was a setup, that they were lovers, and no violence had been committed. The police ordered him to be silent and led him to the car. Before leaving the threshold, Steve cast glances full of hatred and despair, first at Alex, then at Rachel. When the door slammed behind them, there was dead silence in the apartment. Alex dropped the folder on the floor and turned to his wife. Tears flowed from her eyes. She pressed her hand to her lips. What will happen now? You will now have to confirm your words at the station, Alex said coldly. I hope you don't change your mind. She sobbed. I wanted you to forgive me. I'm really sorry. I made a mistake, but I didn't want him to go to jail. Alex looked at her with contempt. A mistake? Yes, you kissed him. You were ready to make love to him, right? Is this your mistake? All this time I was a backup option for you, and this one was just another friend. No, she began, but could not finish, choking in tears. I'm not going to listen to your excuses, Alex said harshly. You made the choice yourself. Now I'll make my own. What other choice? Rachel whispered. I'm filing for divorce, Alex snapped, and I don't want to see you anymore. I don't care what happens to you and that. He couldn't finish the sentence, holding back the rolling wave of anger and disgust. But Alex, she moaned, everything was so good with us. How can you cut everything off so quickly? Everything was fine until you brought him to our home, Alex muttered. Do you want sincerity? I have long felt that something was wrong between you. I made a fool of myself, hoping that it was just my imagination. It turned out not. He turned away, picked up the folder with documents, and headed towards the door. Rachel rushed after him. Where are you going? Now representatives of law enforcement will arrive. They will ask us to go to the station. They will ask questions. I will answer their questions, Alex said with cold calm. But after this, I'll leave. By the way, I will put the house up for sale. You can try to object, but remember that it is registered to me. I won't keep the place where we live together. There was determination in his voice. Get your things or do whatever you want, I don't care. Alex, please, let's talk, she sobbed, trying to grab his sleeve. Let's try to restore everything that was. He pulled back his sleeve. You killed what happened with your own hands. You yourself chose this lie, succumbed to desire. It's too late now. Soon the police returned to the apartment. One of them nodded to Alex, inviting him to get into the car to drive to the station and record a statement. Rachel followed, looking at her husband with pleading eyes. But Alex tried not to meet her eyes. He testified, confirming that he had caught Steve at the moment of the attack, stated his version, and Rachel, gathering the last of her will, also said about the same thing. Alex saw how she realized that they were actually destroying an innocent person, although he really turned out to be a traitor, but not a rapist. However, the situation has gone too far. After the formalities, the police said that it was likely that Steve would be charged and set a date to appear in court for additional proceedings. Alex went outside and breathed in the cool air, which seemed prickly and damp to him. He looked up at the gray sky, as if it too was frowning in agreement with his depressed state. Rachel froze next to her, not knowing how to start a conversation. Alex turned to her. And now here's what. I'm leaving this city. As soon as I complete the formalities at work and find a buyer for the house. You can stay here for a while, but don't count on me. The marriage is over. Please listen to me, she begged, breaking into a scream. Forgive me, I beg you. I made a mistake. I was depressed, confused. He said beautiful words, but I didn't know what I was doing. I don't need this, Alex muttered with disgust. A mistake is when you forget your keys at home, and you let him kiss you in my bedroom. In my eyes, you are now nobody. He walked towards the car, and Rachel didn't dare stop him. Alex received a call from his boss. He again asked when Alex would appear, since the presentation had been postponed. Alex replied that he would not be able to speak and asked to pass everything on to his colleague. The boss was indignant and said that this is not how things are done, and perhaps the question will arise about Alex's future in the company. But Alex only briefly repeated, I'm quitting. Family matters. That evening, Alex packed his suitcase and moved to a temporary hotel. He couldn't bear to be under the same roof as Rachel anymore. Thoughts of Steve's betrayal and vile act were constantly etched into his mind. He understood that the decision to lie to the police was an act of his insane rage. At the same time, he did not have a shadow of regret. He wanted Steve to get what he deserved, and he himself was not ready to save his wife, who destroyed their marriage. Alex now longed for only one thing, to leave the city, forget this nightmare, and start life from scratch. Several days passed in turmoil. Alex filed for divorce, hired a realtor, and announced the sale of the house. He set the price slightly below the market price, in order to quickly get rid of the memories that were sitting in every corner of this home. Sometimes Rachel tried to call him, write messages, begging to meet. Alex threw the phone without answering. Only once, when she called from an unfamiliar number, did he pick up. Hearing her voice, he said, "Don't call me again. Nothing will change." She sobbed and tried to say that Steve seemed to be able to prove that he was not a rapist, that the lawyer would get the charges dropped. But Alex just snorted. "At least tell me the whole truth. I don't care. I'm done with both of you." He dropped the call and never made contact again. Another 2 weeks passed, and the house found a buyer. Alex settled the formalities, spent part of the proceeds on settlements with the bank for old obligations, transferred part to a new account, after which he got into the car and, without looking back, drove to another state. He chose a place far away, where he didn't know anyone, where there were no memories associated with Rachel. There he rented a small apartment and decided to try to get a job in a local company that matched his skills. Starting over from scratch at 23 years old is difficult, but anything is better than staying in a city saturated with pain and deception. Every morning, waking up in a new place, Alex looked out the window and tried to realize that now nothing connected him with his old life. Sometimes, as he lay in bed, he thought about how stupid this whole story was. If only he had kicked Steve out right away, if he had spoken directly to Rachel about his suspicions. But all these ifs no longer mattered. What happened was a fact that destroyed his soul. He blamed not only her, but also himself for allowing his emotions to take over and taking an irreversible step with the police. However, as time passed, the pain dulled. Alex managed to get interviews a couple of times, and soon one of the companies offered him a modest position as an analyst. Not that this corresponded to his previous career plans, but he decided that for now he would do this, just to earn a living. Sometimes he caught himself thinking that he didn't feel anything, as if he was empty inside after what happened. The insane anger that filled him at the moment when he caught the betrayal disappeared, leaving only gray ashes. Soon he rented a better place and moved the remaining things that he did not sell along with the house. Among them were old books, some clothes, and a computer. While going through paper photos that were randomly lying around in the box, Alex came across a photo where he and Rachel looked so happy, young, full of hope. With a lump in his throat, he threw the photo into the trash. I didn't want to remember anymore. Probably, somewhere deep down in his soul, he understood that he would not be able to completely erase these 2+ years of marriage, but he tried to stubbornly avoid any nostalgic feelings. Rachel once found him on social networks, wrote a short message with an apology and a new plea for forgiveness. Alex unfriended it without even reading it to the end. He has already made his decision. Everything that connected them was torn apart too cruelly. She probably hoped for some time that his anger would subside and they could find a compromise, but Alex put an end to it. And the more time passed, the more clearly he realized that there was nowhere to return. Sometimes in the evenings, sitting alone on the sofa, he remembered that terrible day when he saw them in an embrace. A picture of half-naked bodies intertwined in a kiss rose before his eyes, and he involuntarily clenched his fists, feeling the remnants of anger. But at the same time, he realized that all this was already in the past, remaining only a heavy burden on his heart. He hoped that someday he would be able to remove this burden completely and learn to trust again. Several months have passed. Alex settled into his new place and tried not to look back. He knew nothing about his ex-wife and Steve. He never admitted it out loud, but sometimes he himself felt guilty. He lied, framed Steve as a rapist, beat him, and all this in order to punish him for his betrayal. Before my eyes there was a picture of a bloody wound on Steve's face, helplessly begging him to stop. Alex could not justify himself with anything other than his uncontrollable pain. But in his new life, there was no room for repentance or returning to the past. He tried to bury it all deep under the surface of consciousness and just move on with his life. Despite all this, he continued to live. He found a more profitable job, gradually managed to rent a better apartment, and even bought himself a new car, albeit a used one. One evening, after a long day of work, he was sitting in his kitchen, looking out the window. Light rain drummed on the glass, and there was a coolness in the air. Alex put a mug of coffee in front of him and suddenly remembered how he once made cocoa for Rachel in the morning. My heart sank, but there were no tears. He just got up, turned off the light, and went to bed. Alex woke up in his apartment, which he rented 15 years ago when he first settled in this city. He stretched, glancing briefly at his watch. 6 in the morning. Usually he got up early, liked to sleep only on weekends, but today he was woken up by some strange dream, which immediately flew out of his head, leaving only a vague feeling of loneliness. In truth, loneliness had accompanied him for a very long time. 20 whole years had passed since the day he left his former life, selling his house and cutting off all contacts. Over these 20 years, Alex changed jobs, but eventually found his place in a small logistics company. He never built serious relationships, content with only rare, non-binding connections. It seemed to him that it was calmer this way. No obligations, no emotional turmoil that he had experienced a long time ago. Then, in the distant past, everything ended hard. Alex didn't even like to remember the details. He convinced himself that everything had long been forgotten, and there was no point in returning to it. True, sometimes, in the evening silence, he was overcome by a feeling of emptiness, as if in the depths of his soul there was a place that had never been filled with anything new. But he learned to live with it. However, an ordinary morning began as usual. Alex did his exercises, took a shower, and quickly got dressed. Then he went out into the corridor, checked his email on his smartphone, and made sure that there were no special letters. Walking along the staircase, he heard distant sounds of repairs somewhere on another floor. Apparently, someone had started a rebuild. But his own life flowed on without much change. He had long been tired of any innovations. A not too busy street awaited him outside. Alex, as usual, got to the office by bus. The day passed with a series of familiar tasks: papers, spreadsheets, emails, a meeting with 2 suppliers, and conversations with colleagues about little things. When Alex returned in the evening, he planned to simply cook dinner and read. He was used to this routine without unexpected guests. However, when he had already cleaned the kitchen and made himself some tea, there was a soft knock on the door. Alex was slightly surprised. He had no friends left who could come visit without warning, and his colleagues usually didn't visit. He thought that maybe it was a mistake. But as soon as he opened the door, he saw a young girl, completely unfamiliar to him. "Hello, I recently moved here," she said embarrassedly, clutching a small package to herself. "My name is Jenna. Sorry to bother you, but could you lend me some salt? I had just moved in and discovered that there was not a single thing in the house, and the shops had already closed." Alex was silent for some time, stunned by such a visit. The girl looked to be in her early 20s, with a neat haircut and a confused smile. He finally came to his senses and said, "Good evening. Of course, come in, I'll give you some salt." Having invited her into the hallway, he went to the kitchen and took out a jar of salt from the top cabinet. While he was looking, I heard her looking around at his modest possessions: a shelf with books, an old coffee table, a sofa. When he returned, Alex handed her the salt. "Here you go. And yes, my name is Alex." "Thank you very much, Alex. To be honest, I've already knocked on a couple of doors, but no one opened," she admitted, smiling awkwardly. "Sorry again for disturbing you. I just moved. I have a lot of boxes, and nothing from basic products. I didn't think that I would have to cook something late." "It's okay," he replied, feeling a strange warmth from her sincerity. "If you need anything else, please contact me." She thanked him and left. Alex closed the door and unexpectedly felt a slight smile on his face. It wasn't that he had any intention of forming a close bond with his new neighbor, but her politeness and friendliness reminded him that he lived in a world where there were people who weren't afraid to knock on someone else's door in search of salt. The next day, he caught a glimpse of Jenna in the hallway, hurrying outside, holding the phone to her ear and waving at him. Alex nodded back at her. Nothing special, just a greeting, but he still noted how rarely he had to say hello to his neighbors over the years. He is accustomed to isolation, to the fact that after work he returns to himself, closes himself within four walls, and so on day after day. A couple of days after this meeting, Alex ran into Jenna again, but in a different context. As he was returning from work, he noticed her sitting on the stairs, looking depressed. Several rags lay at her feet and water was spilled. Seeing Alex, the girl raised her head. "Sorry, my kitchen faucet is leaking and everything is pouring onto the floor. I tried to turn off the water, but I don't know where the damn valve is, and they told me that the repairman could only come tomorrow." She spoke with a sigh, almost ready to burst into tears. Alex immediately realized that the situation could be serious. "Show me where it is. I'll try to help if I can figure it out." He followed her into the apartment. There, in a small kitchen, a puddle actually formed. Water dripped copiously at the base of the pipe. Alex got up on one knee, looked inside under the sink, and saw the valve. In just a minute, he turned off the water supply, and then looked at the wet pipes. Most likely, the gasket is leaking, but at least it won't continue to flood. Jenna looked grateful and embarrassed. She admitted that she has absolutely no knowledge of taps or tools, and she read on the internet that she needed to turn off the water, but did not understand where to look. "Thank you," she said tiredly. "If it weren't for you, I would have sat and waited until the whole floor was flooded. Maybe you can give me some more advice on what to do next." Alex carefully took the bucket of wet rags away from there. "I think I'll have to buy a new gasket tomorrow or call a plumber. In the meantime, the water will have to be opened only for needs and then immediately shut off." Jenna nodded, rubbing her eyes. "It's clear. We'll have to be patient. I know you're tired from work, but please, would you like to have dinner with me? I just managed to buy some groceries. I wanted to make pasta." Alex hesitated for a moment. He was not used to accepting invitations from strangers, but looking at the confused neighbor, he decided that he would not be rude. "Well, let's do it. You are probably upset with yourself. I'm just hungry." She smiled with relief. While Alex was sitting in her living room, looking around the still uninhabited apartment, Jenna was managing the kitchen. Along the way, she said that she came to this city to study, that she worked part-time in the evenings, and dreams of becoming a journalist. Alex listened in silence, interjecting phrases from time to time. It was unusual for him that someone would share their dreams like this. For 20 years, in fact, he had not told anyone about either the past or the future. He preferred not to get attached so as not to experience pain again. Dinner turned out well. The atmosphere remained neutral. They discussed little things. She asked questions about the area where it was better to buy groceries, and Alex gave advice as best he could. He himself wondered why it was so easy for him to communicate with her, although he understood that she was much younger. At the end of the evening, Jenna thanked him for his help and said, "You know, I'm glad that I have such a reliable neighbor." Alex just nodded, trying to joke that he was not a plumber or an expert in everyday life. But Jenna stood her ground. "He gives the impression of a calm and confident person." It was unusual for him to hear such compliments, but he left them unanswered. Since then, they began to intersect more often. Sometimes she knocked on his door if some minor problem arose. "Alex, can you tell me how to screw a light bulb into a chandelier?" "Alex, should I call a technician if I hear a strange sound in the battery?" He mostly responded willingly, although he tried not to get involved further. Jenna shared more and more of her plans, asked where he worked, how his day was going. He answered evasively, "They say he works in logistics, nothing special." However, this was enough for her. Sometimes she noted admiringly that Alex had backbone and the ability to make decisions, while she herself was timid. Alex looked at her with a soft smile, thinking that she still had her whole life ahead of her. She couldn't imagine how people could get burned in relationships. He didn't want to get attached because he knew how it could end. But at the same time, he admitted that he enjoyed her company. That's how they communicated. They didn't talk about personal things for a long time, but they spent the evenings away, sometimes cooking something together or discussing funny situations from her studies. Alex kept his distance, but involuntarily warmed to her sympathy. However, One evening, something did not go according to plan. There was a knock on the door of his apartment again, and Jenna was behind the threshold, but no longer in a cheerful mood. She was tearful. It was clear that she was holding back her tears. Alex let her in, immediately tensed. Is it something serious? Yes. She nodded. I broke up with my boyfriend, and this is probably too direct, but I did it because I realized that I love you. Alex's heart sank. He immediately tried to keep his cool, but he felt an uneasy lump inside. Jenna sobbed. Sorry if I'm scaring you, but I just can't. Ever since we started talking, I understand that I'm not on the same path with that guy, and here you are. She spoke haltingly, torn between embarrassment and the desire to confess. Alex sighed heavily and crossed his arms over his chest. Listen, you are very young, and I have my own life. I'm older than you, and in general, I don't want such a relationship. I know I'm older, she whispered. But is this the main thing if I feel good with you? Alex shook his head. I'm sorry, but this is impossible. We have different life experiences. I'm sorry if I gave you hope. I didn't want to. Tears appeared in her eyes. Then at least let's remain friends. I like your company. I don't want to lose it. He looked at the girl who was asking for the most basic thing, friendship, and felt how awkward it was to refuse. Finally, he nodded. Fine. Let's remain friends. But nothing more, okay? She took several deep breaths and nodded with tears. Then she came out, staggering slightly, as if she was afraid of her own emotional outburst. Alex closed the door and ran his hand over his face. Confusion stirred within him. On the one hand, he did not want an affair. On the other, he felt that he had somehow pushed her towards these feelings, albeit unintentionally. Then events developed in a strange way. A couple of days later, Alex noticed that Jenna was bringing some new acquaintances with her young guys, laughing noisily with them, having dinner together, sometimes going out into the corridor to see them off. He heard voices behind the wall, and for some reason, every time something akin to jealousy sank inside him. He was indignant at himself. What right do I have to be jealous if I don't want a relationship? But the feeling appeared regardless of the mind. Gradually, their communication turned from friendly to awkward. Jenna would sometimes say hi to Alex when they met, but quickly leave as if she was offended. He understood that she couldn't just switch after such a confession, but now it was as if she was demonstrating to him, okay, I'll find someone else to spend time with. Alex felt that this was bothering him, but he stubbornly convinced himself that it would be better this way. He had no right to tell her how to live. This went on for some time. When they did meet on the stairs, the conversation was formal. Alex tried to act cool so as not to create ambiguity. But in his heart, he understood that the situation was gnawing at him. It was unpleasant for him to see how Jenna communicated with others, and at the same time he himself did not want to give her hope. This duality tore apart his calm. One evening, when Alex was about to go to bed, he heard a knock on the door. Opening it, he saw Jenna on the threshold, again with traces of tears. She asked to talk. Alex let her into the living room, trying to look reserved. I don't understand, she said at first. Why do you keep your distance so stubbornly? Can't we just communicate like we used to? Alex looked hard. I don't want to offend you, but when you admitted that you loved me, everything changed. We cannot act as if this did not happen. She came closer. But then what to do? I can't cut you out of my life, and you act like you don't care about me. He clasped his fingers together, feeling his chest boil. I'm trying to make sure you live your life. Why do you need my company if I don't give you what you want? Maybe I don't want to confess my love anymore, she said defiantly. But it hurts me that you just avoid me. At some point, she sharply approached and reached out to his face. Her lips touched his, a brief touch filled with desperation. Alex, stunned, froze for a second, but then pulled away and took a step back. No, sorry, but this is not possible. He turned around and left the apartment, as if it was his own impulse to escape the conflict on the spot. In the hallway, Alex took a few deep breaths, then hurried to his room and slammed the door. My heart was pounding, my thoughts were confused, and all I could think in my head was, I shouldn't have reacted like this, but I couldn't do it any other way either. The next morning, he decided that he would avoid any meeting with Jenna. Now their interaction has become too painful. He did not want to lose his composure, but persistently repeated to himself that the prioritization was clear. They had no future, and any warm communication only pushed the girl to new confessions. But inside, he couldn't deny that this story had already left a mark on him. Never before had he experienced such an internal struggle. Days passed, and indeed Alex saw Jenna less and less. He left the apartment, looking around, trying not to bump into her on the stairs. He heard her sometimes talking to new friends, and his heart sank painfully. He was angry with himself, not understanding where these emotions came from. Didn't I want to be alone? He asked himself. Isn't this my conscious choice? But something has definitely changed. He felt uncomfortable in his own home, because behind the wall there lived a girl who once said that she loved him, and now, apparently, she switches to other people or is simply offended by him. Alex understood that he could not change anything, and at the same time, jealousy continued to burn. He did not admit even to himself that he was jealous, but he felt how every time he saw an unfamiliar man near her door, his mood deteriorated. Meanwhile, their short meetings became strained. One day, they crossed paths at the mailboxes. Jenna greeted quietly and tried to start a conversation. How's work? Everything is fine? Alex responded with a dry, yes, okay, and hid his gaze, pretending to be looking for an important letter. She realized that the dialogue was not going well and left, shrugging her shoulders. Alex stood there, looking after her, and scolded himself for not being able to act sincerely. But he saw no other tactic than keeping his distance. So a heavy atmosphere hung in the air. It was as if they existed in parallel realities, separated by a thin wall. Alex no longer remembered the past, which had once forced him to cut off relations with many people, but now he was worried about the present. He often lay in bed, looking at the ceiling, and thought, why do I feel even more lonely than before, although everything seemed to be going as usual? The answer was obvious. Jenna appeared, stirring up emotions in him, and then he himself threw everything away, fearing the consequences. But now he regrets that it all ended this way, and at the same time, he understood that he was not ready for change. As a result, his mood, their communication, and the general atmosphere in this small corridor suffered. Jenna, for her part, seemed to have found some way out. She went to parties, invited guests, went to the movies with someone. Alex guessed that this was her way of distracting herself from unrequited love. But he had no desire to get involved in any relationship again. He himself broke it all off, and for years he also developed the habit of not letting anyone get closer. Now he was reaping the benefits, painfully aware that this time he had given up something important, but he could not or did not want to change his decision. In fact, a cold period began in their friendship. When Alex recalled the first weeks of their acquaintance, her request for salt, help with the tap, dinners together, he felt sorry for the lost warmth. However, the past cannot be returned. The girl who admired his confidence became a stranger, although she still lived literally nearby, and he himself chose the strategy of withdrawing. One day, turning the key in his door and entering the apartment, Alex heard Jenna returning with another friend. They laughed in the corridor. Alex closed his eyes, closing his eyes from a piercing feeling of jealousy. This is right, he repeated. That's how it should be. She has the right to young guys, but I have long been unfit for a relationship. But you can't command your heart, and a painful emptiness remains inside. So he lived on, with the feeling that memories of fleeting warmth, which he himself had destroyed, were bursting into his gray everyday life. Now, no one asked him for advice about a light bulb or water supply. No one invited him to pasta. Several times he tried to say a few kind words to Jenna in order to at least improve communication, but stopped, thinking that he would only give her false hope or cause new years. A couple more weeks passed, during which they existed in tense proximity. There were no new scenes, no new confessions. Alex pretended to be completely immersed in work, and Jenna led her own lifestyle, studied, and met with friends. And only when he heard her muffled laughter through the wall or saw her silhouette in the window, a dull regret rose in him. He knew that he couldn't change anything and probably didn't want to, although he was tormented by jealousy. So Alex returned to loneliness again, but now it became noticeably heavier. After all, before he thought that he felt good alone, but now he knew that he had touched something warm and living, and then rejected it himself. He tried not to think about the future, let everything go as it goes. But he felt that Jenna would no longer be the same neighbor with whom he communicated at ease. Something is broken forever. And so, one evening, he sat in the dark in the kitchen, looked at his cup of tea, and remembered the recent scene, her quiet words, "I love you," and his own sharp answer, "This is impossible." Then the image of the last kiss surfaced in my mind, short, passionate, but immediately cut off by it. Alex muttered through his teeth, "Everything is repeating itself. Again, I refuse." But he did not continue the thought. He just waved it off, saying, "It's better this way." It was quiet behind the wall. Apparently, she was not at home. Or she was sleeping. Alex closed his eyes and told himself that he needed to stop punishing himself. He did as he saw fit. Maybe over time everything will work out, and she will find herself a more suitable young man who will sincerely love her and not be tormented by fears from the past. And he will remain alone, as he has lived for the last 20 years. So Alex lived on, realizing that it would be hard for him to ignore the fact. A young girl with a warm smile suddenly burst into his world, asked for salt, then managed to melt his usual aloofness, but, following his fears, he did not meet him halfway, but only fenced himself off. Now he is left with dull jealousy and the realization that the old world where he lived without attachments no longer exists. But, not wanting to admit it out loud, he continued to tell himself that everything was under control and that this was how it should be. Nevertheless, every time, going out onto the staircase, Alex involuntarily listened. Would she come out at the same moment? Would she look in his direction? Now he tried to escape before he could meet her gaze. But he understood that he could no longer live as if nothing had happened. Alex sat in his apartment, looking out the window at the dark sky. The day was ordinary, routine, unremarkable, and he was already accustomed to this way of life. But then there was a knock on the door. He was surprised guests had been rare lately. Rising from his chair, he walked over and opened it. Jenna stood on the threshold. Today she looked especially cheerful, although there was something sly and playful in her eyes. In her hands, she held a small package that smelled of something sweet. "Hello," she smiled. "Not busy?" "No, actually, no," Alex answered, letting her inside. "Great, then I'm on time. I'm here with a proposal." She looked at him conspiratorially, leaning against the door frame. "I want to introduce you to my mother." Alex was taken aback. "With your mother?" "Well, yes. She came to me from another city and wants to stay here for a while. Jenna hesitated, searching for words. "She's a very good woman, but it's hard for her to make friends." "And you? Well, you're a great candidate." Alex raised his eyebrows, not knowing whether to laugh or take this statement seriously. "An excellent candidate for what?" "For friendship," she laughed. "You're an adult, smart, and it's interesting to be with you." "She is also quite a smart and interesting woman, but she needs a social circle." "I thought you might have something to talk about." Alex thought about it. There really weren't any new acquaintances in his life, but the prospect of making friends with Jenna's mother seemed strange. "I don't know," he drawled. "Isn't this too unusual?" "What's unusual?" Jenna shrugged. "This is just an acquaintance. Mom loves new conversations, good company, and she cooks divinely. I promise you won't regret it. Moreover, she already knows about you." "About me?" Alex tensed. "Well, yes, I told her about my wonderful neighbor. Just don't look at me like that. She doesn't think anything extra. She's just interested." Alex scratched the back of his head. He didn't know whether to agree, but something in Jenna's tone pushed him to agree. "Okay," he finally answered. "Why not? When do you want us to meet?" "Tomorrow evening. At my house. I'll cook dinner. Mom will bake something delicious. It will be nice. Fine. Tomorrow means tomorrow. Great. Jenna laughed and handed him the package. In the meantime, here's a gift for you. Cupcakes, Mom baked them. Alex took the package, smiling slightly. He didn't know what to expect from this meeting, but there was something strangely cozy about the upcoming evening. Perhaps he should really try to open the door to a new part of his life. Alex stood in front of Jenna's apartment door, holding a small box of chocolates, a gift he decided to take at the last minute so as not to come empty-handed. He didn't expect to be so nervous, but something inside him told him that this dinner would bring something unexpected. He took a deep breath and knocked. The door swung open almost immediately. Jenna greeted him with a wide smile. "Alex, come in, we are already waiting for you." She invited him inside, and he stepped into the apartment. There was a delicious aroma of fresh baked goods in the air, mixed with something spicy and warm, the smell of home comfort. Alex glanced around the living room, noticing small changes: cozy candles on the table, a blanket casually thrown over the back of the chair, soft lamplight. "Make yourself at home," Jenna said, taking the box of chocolates from him. "Mom will be happy." "Yes, of course," Alex answered, but his voice trembled a little. He was sure that this was just an ordinary dinner, but a slight feeling of anxiety still crept into his consciousness. "Mom, Alex has arrived." Jenna called towards the kitchen. Light footsteps came from the kitchen. Alex turned his head, and his breath caught for a moment. Rachel stood in front of him. The world seemed to have shrunk into one point. He felt time slow down. 20 years have passed, and he has not seen her since he finally broke all ties with his past life. But here she is, standing in front of him, just as beautiful, but with noticeable changes. Small wrinkles near the eyes, soft facial features, a look full of surprise, which was immediately replaced by cold-blooded politeness. "Alex," her voice was even, but there was tension in it. What an unexpected surprise. He was barely breathing. A hurricane of emotions raged inside him: shock, rage, fear, even a certain dark satisfaction. He didn't know what to expect from this meeting. And she? Apparently, her feelings were no less confused. But Jenna didn't notice anything. She happily turned to her mother. "Mom, this is Alex, my neighbor. I told you about him." Rachel hesitated for a moment, but then smiled, the way well-mannered people smile when they meet someone for the first time, or when they pretend that they are meeting for the first time. "Yes, of course," she said calmly, holding out her hand to him. "Very nice, Alex." He took her hand and squeezed it tightly. Her fingers were still as warm, but now he felt the emptiness between them, the abyss that had formed over the past years. "Me too," he squeezed out, meeting her eyes. None of them gave themselves away, although a whole ocean of memories was boiling inside each of them. Alex was no longer the naive young man who once allowed himself to blindly believe in love, and Rachel had clearly changed too. But Jenna, suspecting nothing, happily clapped her hands. "Well, that's great. Let's sit down at the table." There was tense silence at the table. Jenna, happy and carefree, did not notice how the air between Alex and Rachel literally rang with unspoken words and hidden emotions. She happily poured wine into glasses, moving one of the plates closer to Alex. "Mom, you did amazing," she exclaimed, enjoying a piece of lasagna. "Alex, try it. Mom is a real master." Alex slowly picked up his fork, doing his best not to look at Rachel. He felt her presence on his skin, caught the slightest movement, and heard her every careful word. Everything that seemed like an ordinary family dinner to Jenna was torture for him. He felt the tension building in his chest, as if a spring was about to break. "Yes, very tasty," he squeezed out, breaking off a piece of bread. Rachel sat opposite her hands folded in her lap and her back straight, as if she was trying to keep herself from shaking. She also ate almost nothing, only slowly moving her fork around the plate, avoiding looking at Alex. But he knew, inside her, everything was probably turning upside down just like his. "Alex, what are you doing?" Rachel asked in an even voice, as if she had just met him for the first time. He looked up at her, pausing for just a split second. I work in logistics, he answered briefly. This is wonderful, she smiled. Jenna said that you have a very stable job. Alex felt his shoulders tense. He understood perfectly well that they were playing a game. Politeness, detachment, duty questions. All this was a cover for something much more complex. Jenna, suspecting nothing, continued to chat, but Alex could not concentrate on her words. At some point, he caught himself thinking that he could barely breathe. This woman, whom he loved and hated at the same time, was close again, and it was unbearable. He put down his fork and looked at his watch. Sorry, I have to go. I remembered that I still have things to do. Jenna frowned. Already? You barely ate anything. Yes, sorry, he said, standing up. It was nice to meet you, Rachel. She nodded slightly. Mutual, Alex. He felt a shiver run down his spine, but he did not give himself time for unnecessary thoughts. After quickly thanking her for dinner, he headed towards the door. Jenna saw him off with slight bewilderment, and Rachel remained at the table, clutching a fork in her hands. Alex returned home, but the feeling of heaviness that settled in his chest did not go away. He tried to do his usual things, put the kettle on, turn on the TV, but the same thought kept spinning in his head, a thought that made him feel either hot or cold. Jenna could be my daughter. This guess, which at first flashed like a stupid, absurd impulse, now did not leave him alone. The more he thought about it, the more he realized that it was not so unreasonable. He went over every detail in his head: Jenna's age, her look, her gestures, manner of speaking, lip shape, even the expression on his face in moments of thoughtfulness. All this did not give him peace. Rachel. She sat at the table, trying to look serene, but in her eyes he saw something that he could not immediately decipher. Was it just the tension of the unexpected meeting? Or wine? Alex sat down at the kitchen table, resting his elbows on its smooth surface, and covered his face with his hands. From time to time he looked up and saw his reflection in the mirror. It looked at him with the same bewilderment and fear. If Jenna is his daughter, that changes everything. He remembered the moment when Rachel first introduced her. This is my neighbor that I told you about. She said it so easily, as if they were really just acquaintances, as if there was no betrayal, pain, or broken life in their past, as if Alex was a stranger. And yet, was it a lie, or a way to hide something deeper? Remembering her age, he quickly calculated, if Jenna is 20 years old. It became difficult for him to breathe. He forced himself to stand, walked around the room, then abruptly sat back down. He remembered how he and Rachel had talked about children many years ago, about how they wanted to postpone this moment in order to first strengthen their positions, earn more money, and become stable. Then he was ready to wait. He believed that one day they would get there together. But soon after that, Steve burst into their lives and everything fell apart. Alex clenched his teeth, clenching his hands into fists. Is it possible that Rachel was already pregnant then? Is it possible that she hid it? Is it possible that he lived for 20 years without knowing about his daughter's existence? He remembered Jenna, her lightness, her smile, her warmth. She always seemed familiar to him, but he did not attach any importance to it. And now he couldn't help but see features in her that seemed to reflect himself. I need to know the truth. This thought pulsed in his head, becoming more and more insistent. But how? He couldn't just ask Rachel. He couldn't tell Jenna, look, maybe I'm your father. That would be crazy. If he is wrong, he will destroy her trust. If right. Alex stood up and went to the window. The night lights of the city flickered behind the glass, but he did not see them. There was only one question in his mind: what to do next? Alex didn't sleep almost all night. The thought that Jenna could be his daughter burned from the inside, giving no peace. He walked around the apartment, trying to calm down, but the more he thought, the more helpless he felt. Early in the morning, there was a knock on the door. He froze, his heart stopped for a moment. Who could it be so early? He stepped to the door, opened. Rachel. She stood in front of him in a simple jacket and jeans, but looked tired. There was something in her eyes that he had not seen for 20 years: indecision, fear, guilt. "Can I come in?" she asked quietly. Alex silently stepped aside, letting her inside. He closed the door and took a deep breath before turning to face her. "Why are you here?" His voice was even, but everything was seething inside. Rachel walked deeper into the apartment, looked around as if remembering something distant, but then turned to him. "You know why?" Alex clenched his jaw. "Say it out loud." She closed her eyes, took a slow breath, then spoke, almost in a whisper. "It's possible." Deaf silence filled the space. Alex felt a wave of heat cover him, then cold. "What do you mean, possibly?" His voice broke into a dull laugh. "Yes or no, Rachel." She swallowed. "I don't know for sure, but in terms of timing, yes, it is possible." Alex slowly ran his hand over his face, then looked at her, glaringly, as if trying to see the truth in her. "You mean you've been hiding this from me for 20 years? 20 years, Rachel." She closed her eyes, as if his voice was tearing her apart. I I didn't know how to say it. At first I thought it might be Steve." Her voice trembled, she bit her lip. "But he couldn't have children. I found out later." Alex blinked. "What?" "He had problems. He didn't tell me right away, but then, when I became pregnant, he admitted that he had almost no chance of becoming a father. Then I already suspected that the child could be yours." Alex clenched his fists. "And you didn't tell me anything." "I was afraid. You hated me. I knew that I had broken everything we had, and I couldn't come to you with this." She lowered her gaze, clenching her hands. "I convinced myself that it wasn't worth ruining your life again. It's better to leave everything as is. But now." "Now what?" "Now you just decided to come and say, 'Oh, maybe you have an adult daughter.'" He began to walk around the room, not knowing where to put his hands. "What should I do with this, Rachel?" She looked at him, her eyes filled with tears. "I didn't come to demand something from you. I can't keep this secret any longer. I see how you and Jenna interact, and I know that if this is true, then you should know." Alex breathed heavily, lowered his head, then looked at her again. "Do you understand that this changes everything? If she's my daughter, I've missed her my whole life. I wasn't there when she grew up, when she needed a father. I can't just accept it like this. And you know what else? Jenna told me she liked me. How do you think she will feel when she finds out that her crush might be her own father? Do you have any idea what you've gotten us all into?" Rachel took a step closer, but stopped. "I understand." Her voice trembled. "Alex, I'm so sorry. I made a mistake, but I really thought it would be better this way." "Better for whom? For me? For her? Or for you?" His voice was full of bitterness. She looked away, at a loss for words. Alex ran his hand through his hair, feeling how everything was bubbling inside. And then they heard a rustling at the door. Both turned around sharply. "Jenna." She stood in the doorway, white-faced, her eyes wide and darting from Alex to Rachel. She had the phone in her hands, her fingers gripping it tightly, as if it could help keep her grounded in reality. "What? What did you say?" Her voice was barely audible. Rachel turned pale and took a step forward. "Jenna." But the girl recoiled, looking at her in complete horror, then turned her gaze to Alex. Are you my father?" Alex stood motionless, looking at Jenna. His heart was beating wildly, and he didn't know what to say. The air in the room became thick, the tension unbearable. "Are you my father?" she repeated, but this time her voice was no longer a whisper, but full of rage and pain. Rachel tried to take a step towards her daughter, but she retreated sharply, her hands trembling, her chest heaving. "Jenna, listen to me," Rachel began, but was interrupted. "No, you have no right to speak," Jenna screamed, her eyes darting between her mother and Alex. "You've been lying to me all your life. You were hiding it. You doomed me to a lie." Alex clenched his fists, trying to process what was happening, but before he could say anything, Jenna stepped forward, her gaze darting straight to him. "And you? Why are you silent?" she shouted, her voice breaking with emotion. "Did you know? Did you know that too?" "No." Alex gasped, his voice hoarse and shocked. I only found out now. Lie, Jenna shouted, stomping her foot. You both. You both played with me. You let me. Let me feel this. She took a shaky breath, tears flowing down her cheeks, but she did not wipe them away. Her hands clenched into fists, her body trembling with rage and betrayal. Jenna, Alex stepped closer, but she suddenly raised her hand, forcing him to stop. Don't you dare, her voice broke. Don't you dare even come close to me. I trusted you, I thought. She sobbed convulsively. I thought that, damn it, Alex, I loved you. Those words, spoken so directly, hit him harder than he could have expected. He felt the world beneath his feet shake, turn into chaos. You don't understand, he whispered, feeling his throat constrict. Oh, I understand. She grinned through her tears, but there was no joy in her voice. I understand that all this time you knew that to you I was just. Error? Inconvenience? You didn't even think about me. You were just playing the good neighbor, and I. She trailed off, pursing her lips. Rachel stepped forward, trying to speak, but Jenna turned sharply to her, her eyes flashing. And you, she shouted. You destroyed everything. Why didn't you tell me? Why did you take away the opportunity to know the truth? Why did you let me love him? Rachel looked at her with tear-stained eyes, but Jenna didn't want to see her regret. You ruined my life, she whispered, her voice filled with hatred. You made me dirty forever. You made me feel something I should never have felt. Alex closed his eyes, his heart ached, but he couldn't find the words to make the situation better. Everything collapsed. All, and nothing could change that. Jenna, trembling with emotion, stepped back, then turned around and ran out of the apartment, slamming the door behind her. Dead silence reigned in the room. Rachel buried her face in her hands, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. Alex just stood there, feeling the remnants of his world crumble into dust. Alex hasn't seen Jenna for several days. He heard her returning home late at night, the quiet slam of the door to her apartment, her hasty descent down the stairs in the early morning, avoiding a collision with him. He knew she was nearby, but it was as if an invisible wall had grown between them. Every time he stepped out into the stairwell, he was overcome by a strange, oppressive feeling, as if someone had erased her from his life, leaving only a ghost that flickered in the shadows. He tried not to think about her, but it was impossible. He found himself listening to the sounds behind the wall, hoping to hear her laughing on the phone or turning on music, but there was only silence. Jenna has disappeared. Not physically, but emotionally, she cut him out of her life. One day, he decided to take the first step. He walked up to her door and knocked. Once, then more. Silence. He knew she was there. He felt her presence, but there was no answer. Jenna, he said, trying to keep his voice even. We need to talk. Silence again. He waited. Just a minute. 2. Finally, he sighed heavily and retreated. In the evening, he noticed her in the hall. She left the house, pulling her hood over her head, quickly walking towards the exit. He called out to her. Jenna. She stopped but didn't turn around. Tension hung in the air, as if the world stood still waiting for her answer. Then she took a step forward, and then another. Jenna, please wait. He caught up with her, but she only quickened her pace. Leave me alone. Her voice was icy, but there was pain in it. Just, don't touch me. Jenna, I'm sorry. I didn't know. She suddenly turned around, her eyes flashing with anger. You didn't know, she hissed. Do you think this changes anything? Do you think it makes me feel better that you are just as much a victim of this lie as I am? No, Alex. It's not easy for me. I'm disgusted. I'm in pain. I want to disappear. Her voice trembled, but she did not cry. She looked at him with such pain that he felt something shrinking inside him. I don't want to see you, she said quietly, stepping back. Not now, maybe not ever. Just leave me. And she left. Alex was left standing in the empty hallway, watching the door close behind her. He knew this conversation didn't change anything. Perhaps he lost her forever. Alex sat in his chair, holding a glass of whiskey in his hands. He didn't drink often, but this evening he wanted to drown out the chaos in his head. Thoughts about Jenna, her hatred, her pain did not give him peace. He felt empty, as if the world around him had lost color. There was a knock on the door. He frowned, not expecting anyone. Getting up, he slowly walked to the door and opened it. Rachel. She stood on the threshold in a light coat. Her hair was slightly tossed by the wind, and a mixture of indecision and despair was visible in her eyes. "Can I come in?" she asked quietly. Alex wanted to close the door, but something in her gaze stopped him. He took a step back, allowing her to enter. Rachel walked in and looked around, noticing a bottle of whiskey on the table. "Do you drink?" She frowned slightly. "Sometimes," he answered briefly, closing the door. She turned to him, crossing her arms over her chest. "I know you hate me." "Do I hate it?" Alex smiled bitterly. "Rachel, I haven't even thought about you for so many years. You were a ghost from the past that I buried, and now you've come back and turned everything upside down." She swallowed, but didn't look away. "I didn't mean to hurt you. And I know you're suffering. Jenna too." Alex sighed heavily and ran his hand over his face. "Did you come to tell me that I ruined everything?" "No," she whispered. "I came to say that you were the only man I truly loved." Alex froze. He expected anything: accusations, tears, persuasion. But not this. "What do you want, Rachel?" His voice was tired. She stepped closer. "I want to try to fix everything. I want you to look at me again like before." He looked at her with a long, searching gaze. "Do you think that after everything that happened, I can just take it and forget?" She nodded. "I know that you can't forget, but maybe we can start again." He smiled bitterly and took a sip of whiskey. "You're late, Rachel. There's too much between us. Too many lies, too much pain." She stepped even closer and gently touched his hand. "Maybe all is not lost." Her voice was warm, pleading. Alex closed his eyes, feeling the past come to life again. He remembered her smell, her touch, her voice. But as soon as he opened his eyes, it was not the same Rachel he knew before. Now this was the woman who brought chaos into his life. He pulled away slowly. "I can't," he said, looking into her eyes. "I'm not the person you remember." Rachel lowered her hand, her shoulders slumping. "So it's all over?" she asked, barely audible. Alex nodded. "Yes." She lingered for another second, then silently turned around and walked out, leaving behind a slight scent of perfume and a taste of the past that would never return. Alex avoided Rachel. After her attempt to get closer, he did everything to avoid interfering with her. He did not answer her calls, did not open the door when she came. He wanted to leave the past where it belonged in the past. But fate decreed otherwise. One evening, as he was returning home, he ran into her right at his door. She was clearly waiting for him. "Alex, please talk to me." Her voice was full of despair. "Rachel, we have nothing to talk about," he replied coldly, taking out his keys. "We have something to talk about," she said firmly. "I know it's complicated, but you can't just ignore me." He sighed heavily, clenched his teeth, and opened the door. "Fine. 5 minutes. No more." Rachel walked inside, looking around as if trying to read his life from the details of the interior. Alex closed the door, crossing his arms over his chest. "Speak." She swallowed nervously, her eyes darting around the room as if she was searching for the right words. "I can't just let you go, Alex," she finally said. "I know there are a lot of mistakes. I know I hurt you, but I'm still." She hesitated, as if she was afraid to say it out loud. "What are you still doing?" he asked sharply. "Still love you," she whispered. Alex clenched his jaw. There was tension in the room. "You're late," he said. "It's too late, Rachel." She stepped closer, her eyes shining with suppressed tears. "Maybe it's not too late." She raised her hand, gently touching his cheek. Alex flinched at her touch. Everything inside him protested, but something deep in his soul reminded him of the times when he truly loved her. He looked into her eyes and could not understand what he was feeling. "You can't just show up in my life and turn it around again," he whispered. I don't want to turn it over, she replied. I want to be close. And then it happened. He didn't know who made the first move, who closed the distance between them. Maybe it was her. Maybe it was him. But suddenly their lips touched. It was a quick, emotional kiss, a reminiscence of the past and an attempt to understand the present. But the next second the door opened. Alex, I. Jenna's voice broke off, as if someone had knocked the air out of her. They pulled away sharply from each other. Alex turned to the door and saw Jenna. Her eyes were filled with shock and pain. She clutched an envelope in her hand, which she immediately threw on the floor. Here, her voice trembled. Results. I don't need to know anything else. She turned around and ran out, slamming the door. Alex felt an icy despair welling up in his chest. He rushed after her, but it was too late. She disappeared. He looked at the envelope, the one that could confirm or dispel his worst fears. But now, perhaps, it didn't matter what was written inside. Alex stood motionless, looking at the envelope that Jenna had just thrown. There was a ringing silence in the room. He heard only his own breathing and the beating of his heart. A storm of emotions raged inside him: fear, doubt, hope. Rachel took a step forward, but he raised his hand to stop her. Not now, he said quietly. She froze, knowing that at that moment there was nothing she could say that would make him feel better. Alex slowly leaned over and picked up the envelope. It was sealed, but the corner was already slightly torn. Jenna had probably opened it before she arrived. He ran his fingers over the paper, feeling the tension in his chest growing. Are you going to open it? Rachel asked carefully. Alex didn't answer. He tore the edge of the envelope, pulled out a folded piece of paper, and unfolded it. His eyes skimmed over the official lines, long codes and medical terms, but then he saw the main part. Chance of affinity, 0%. He reread it several times, as if he didn't believe it. Then he squeezed the paper in his hands, feeling a strange wave of relief and shock run through his body at the same time. I'm not her father, he whispered. Rachel swallowed. Alex. He looked up at her. At that moment, a click occurred in his mind. He realized what exactly he had been feeling all this time. He didn't see Jenna as a daughter. The entire time she was around, he tried to suppress emotions that he considered wrong and forbidden. He tried to fight himself. But now the truth stood before him in all its clarity. He loved her. For real. Not as a friend, not as a neighbor, not as a random person from the past. He loved her the way a man loves a woman. And now he knew that he could give these feelings freedom. Rachel looked at him carefully. What are you going to do? Her voice sounded cautious, but there was something else in it. Jealousy? Alex slowly inhaled and exhaled. I have to find her. He walked around the room, clutching the results sheet in his hand. Thoughts were racing chaotically in my head. He reread the dry words on the paper again, as if checking if he had made a mistake, but every time he saw the same thing. Chance of affinity, 0%. Jenna was not his daughter. Everything he felt, everything he tried to isolate himself from, turned out to be real. Now he had no reason to deny it. Rachel didn't take her eyes off him. Alex. Her voice was cautious, almost pleading. I know everything is confusing, but maybe this is a sign. Maybe you can still try. What should I try? He turned sharply to her. There was fatigue and irritation in his voice. Pretend that nothing happened? Should I take you back? What are you talking about, Rachel? She lowered her head, but didn't back down. I want you to be happy. I thought maybe we could do it again. Alex smiled bitterly. You again? Once again you want me to forget everything? I can't. I'm not the same person you knew 20 years ago. He ran his hand over his face, trying to collect himself. A strange feeling was pressing in my chest, a mixture of relief, regret, and anticipation. He knew he couldn't stay here. His place was next to Jenna. I lost her, he said quietly, more to himself than to Rachel. You don't know that for sure, she answered softly. She ran away from me. Alex shook his head. She heard you tell me that you loved me. She saw us. Rachel didn't say anything. She knew that she was the cause of this disaster, but there was nothing she could do to fix it. Alex slowly inhaled and exhaled. He walked to the door, took one last look at Rachel, and said, "I need to find her, because if I don't do it now, I'll never forgive myself." Alex sat in his apartment, holding the phone in his hand. He dialed Jenna's number for the 10th time that day, but again and again he heard only long beeps and then an answering machine. He left messages, wrote to her, but there was no answer. Jenna has disappeared. 2 days have passed since her escape. That evening, when she saw him and Rachel, when she dropped off the envelope with the results, she ran away, and he was never able to catch up with her. He hoped that she was simply hiding with one of her friends, that she needed time to comprehend everything. But now he was beginning to realize the terrible truth. She had left. For real. On the third day, he went to her apartment. I knocked. Silence. He knocked again, harder. Nobody opened it. There was a sense of finality in the air, as if the apartment already belonged to someone else. He gritted his teeth, then pulled the door handle sharply. Locked. Of course it's locked. At that moment, he noticed that an elderly neighbor from the apartment opposite was coming out of the entrance. She narrowed her eyes at him. "Are you looking for that girl and her mother?" she asked. Alex turned to her, his heart clenching. "Her mother? Has Rachel left too?" The neighbor nodded. "Yes, they both left yesterday, with suitcases. We called a taxi and left for the airport. They seemed very upset." Alex clenched his teeth, then sharply pulled the door handle. Locked. Of course it's locked. Alex staggered as if he had been hit in the stomach. She really left. She didn't just disappear for a few days. She left, probably forever. "Thank you," he barely squeezed out and slowly headed down the stairs. His legs felt like lead. He went outside and looked at the sky. Aircraft. Somewhere in there, among them, there might have been her flight. Where did she go? He didn't know. And now, perhaps, he will never know. Returning home, he tried calling again. Autoresponder. Wrote a message. "Jenna, please answer. I need to talk to you." Time, 2. Day. Silence. Every new day without her seemed empty to Alex. He thought about her while drinking his morning coffee. "I thought when I went out into the street, when I went into the store, when I heard her name accidentally dropped in a conversation. Everything reminded me of her." He could no longer deny what he knew all along. He loved her. Loved deeper and stronger than I've ever loved anyone. But now it was too late. He lost her. Several weeks passed, but Jenna seemed to disappear into thin air. Alex tried to find her in every possible way. Called, wrote messages, checked her social networks. But everywhere there was the same thing: silence. Its pages were not updated. The phone continued to emit long beeps or immediately transfer to an answering machine. He didn't know where she was, who she was with, what city she lived in now. Every day began the same way. Alex woke up with a slight hope that maybe today she would answer, that he would hear her voice, that she would say at least something, even angry, even through tears, but she would be there. But the hours passed, the day gave way to evening, and then to night, and in this night there was always silence. He replayed their every conversation in his head, remembered every detail of their meetings, looked for the moment when everything went wrong, when he could have said something differently, corrected something, prevented something. But this moment did not happen, or he just couldn't find it. He tried to get to work, but his thoughts kept returning to Jenna. Any word accidentally thrown by colleagues, any song, any film reminded of her. In the store, he saw her favorite chocolate, and his chest sank unpleasantly. In the park, he noticed a girl with the same hair, and his heart jumped for a moment, but when she turned around, he realized that it was not her. There were signs of her absence everywhere. In the evenings, he sat at home, holding the phone in his hands, forcing himself not to write to her again. He knew it wouldn't help, but his hand itself reached out to the screen, and he scrolled through their correspondence again and again, reread old messages, and looked for something in them that he had not noticed before. In one of them she wrote, "Have you ever felt like you just wanted to disappear for a while?" Then he did not attach any importance to it. Now he knew it was a warning sign. At some point, he realized that he had one more option left: Rachel. If anyone could know where Jenna is now, it would be her mother. He didn't want to talk to her, didn't want to hear her voice again remember everything that had happened between them and what would never happen again. But there was no choice. He held the phone in his hands for a long time, replaying the script of their conversation over and over again. Maybe Rachel will tell him that Jenna is with her, that she's okay. Or vice versa, she will say that she also does not know where her daughter is, but there will be a hidden lie in her voice. Alex couldn't help but think that Rachel might have sent Jenna somewhere far away specifically to get her out of his life. Finally, he dialed the number. "Hello?" Rachel's voice sounded tired. Alex swallowed, his throat dry. "Rachel, do you know where she is?" There was a pause on the other end of the line. He heard her exhale slowly, as if gathering her thoughts. "No, Alex," she finally answered. "I don't know." He clutched the phone tighter. "You're lying," he whispered. "You should know." "If I knew, do you think I wouldn't tell?" There was irritation mixed with despair in her voice. "She doesn't answer me. She just disappeared." Alex ran his hand over his face, feeling powerlessness growing inside him. "I have to find her, Rachel. I can't just let it go." "Do you think it's easier for me?" She snapped. "I lost my daughter, Alex. Do you even understand this?" He closed his eyes. Yes, he understood. They both lost it. Only now there was no certainty that they would ever be able to return it. "If you find out something," he said after a long pause, "tell me." Rachel didn't answer right away. Then she said quietly, "Yes, certainly." But there was no confidence in her voice. Alex felt like it was goodbye. When he hung up the phone, the loneliness hit in full force. He sat in the darkness of his apartment, listening to the silence, and realized that he had lost it. Perhaps forever. The night was dark and quiet. Alex sat on the couch, staring at the turned-off TV. His thoughts were somewhere far away. Fatigue throbbed in my temples, but sleep did not come. He had long been accustomed to these painful nights, when his mind gave no rest, returning him to the same question: where is she? Where's Jenna? Over these weeks, the whole world had become colorless for him, as if something important had disappeared with her departure. He tried to move on with his life, but every day was similar to the previous one: empty, meaningless. And suddenly, there was a knock on the door. Alex winced. No one came this part of the night. He frowned, glancing quickly at his watch. 2 in the morning. The heart skipped a beat. The knock was repeated, quiet but persistent. He slowly got up from the sofa and headed towards the door. Coming closer, he froze, listening. Nobody said a word, only deaf silence outside the door. "Who's there?" he asked, not recognizing his own voice. There was no answer. But then another knock was heard, this time a little stronger. Alex carefully turned the lock and slowly opened the door. Jenna stood on the threshold. Her face was pale, her hair was slightly tangled, and her eyes were red, as if she had been crying for a long time. She was shaking, and Alex couldn't tell if it was from the cold or something else. At that moment, he could have sworn that his heart simply stopped. They looked at each other, and time seemed to freeze. "Jenna," his voice broke. She opened her mouth as if she was going to say something, but instead of speaking, she simply shook her head. Her lips trembled. "Can I come in?" she whispered. Alex didn't hesitate. He stepped aside to let her inside. When she entered, he closed the door, still not believing that this was not a dream. Jenna stood in the middle of the room, clutching the strap of her bag. She looked lost, broken. "Where have you been?" he asked quietly. She took a deep breath, avoiding his gaze. "I left. Further away. I needed time." Her voice was quiet, as if she had no strength left to speak louder. "But I couldn't take it anymore. She looked up at him, full of emotions that she had been holding back for so long. "I couldn't live without you anymore," she whispered. Alex felt something inside him tremble. All these weeks he had dreamed of seeing her again, of hearing her voice, but now that she was standing in front of him, He did not know what to say. "Why did you come back?" he asked after a long pause. Jenna pursed her lips as if struggling with emotions. "Because you are the only place where I feel at home, Alex." Her voice was filled with sincere pain. "I tried to start over, tried to forget, but I couldn't. I love you." He closed his eyes, feeling her words cover him with a wave of warmth and fear at the same time. She took a step towards him, and then another. Alex didn't move, couldn't. When she reached out and gently touched his face, he winced. "If you don't want to see me," she began in a trembling voice, "I'll leave. But if even a part of you still wants me, tell me." Alex looked into her eyes. She was here. After all the weeks of pain, doubt, and loneliness, she was back. And he knew that he could no longer let her go. Alex looked at Jenna, unable to comprehend that she was really there. Her words still echoed in his head. "I love you." Those 3 words that he had wanted to hear so many times, but was afraid to admit that he had felt it too. They stood opposite each other in a dimly lit room, lit only by the dim light of street lamps coming through the windows. Silence hung in the air, and none of them was in a hurry to break it. Finally, Alex took a deep breath and motioned for her to sit down. He sat down opposite her, not taking his eyes off her. Jenna nervously fingered the hem of the sleeve of her jacket, as if trying to collect her thoughts. "You left." His voice was hoarse. "I was looking for you." She nodded, lowering her head. "I know." Her voice was barely audible. "I read your messages. I heard your calls. But I just couldn't answer." Alex ran his hand over his face, trying to cope with the surging emotions. "Why?" Jenna looked up at him. There was so much pain, so much doubt. "Because I tried to forget you, Alex," she whispered. "I left thinking that if I stayed away, if I tried to cut you out of my life, then I could move on. That I can pretend like nothing happened, like I didn't feel." She fell silent, looking at him expectantly. Alex felt his heart clench. "And?" he asked quietly. She smiled bitterly. "I couldn't." She shook her head. "No matter how hard I tried, no matter where I went, you were still in my head. In every moment, in every dream, in every thought." She closed her eyes as if trying to hold back tears. "Alex, you have become everything to me. And it scared me. Because I didn't know if you felt the same. Because it seemed to me that everything was a mistake. That our feelings were wrong." Alex looked at her, feeling something inside him break. He thought about her so many times, about how their conversation might have turned out if he had another chance. And here he is. "It's not a mistake, Jenna," he finally said. "It was never a mistake." She took a shaky breath and then suddenly shook her head, laughing nervously. "I don't know what to do next, Alex. I'm so tired of running away, but I'm afraid to stay." He reached out to her and gently took her hand. She was shaking. Jenna squeezed his fingers as if she was afraid that he would disappear. "Then don't run away," he said quietly. "Stay." She looked up at him sharply, and something else flashed in her eyes, besides fear, a deep, unrevealed recognition. She took a deep breath, and her voice trembled. "Alex, I want you to know. When I agreed to take DNA samples," she trailed off, squeezing his hand tighter, "I thought it would destroy me. What if it turns out that you are my father? I don't know what I would do, because I already loved you then, but not the way a daughter loves her father, and how a woman loves a man." Alex tensed when he heard these words. They echoed in him with pain, fear, but also with something else, something that he had not allowed himself to realize before. He looked at her, unable to say a word. "I remember how my hand shook when I carried these samples, how scared I was to get the results," she continued. "I cursed myself for my feelings, for the fact that I couldn't control them. I prayed that the test would show that you are nobody to me, so that I have at least one chance to allow myself to love you." She smiled faintly. "And when I saw the result, I didn't feel any relief. I felt horror, because now I had no excuses. Now I couldn't tell myself that it was just a mistake. Now I know that I love you, and this is reality. Pure, frightening reality." Alex couldn't breathe. All this time he had not allowed himself to believe that her feelings were as strong. He tried to force them inside, tried to force himself to be rational. But now that she said it out loud, everything inside him collapsed. He reached out his hand and gently touched her face. Jenna, his voice broke. She closed her eyes, leaning slightly into his touch. I don't want to run away anymore, Alex. I just want to be with you. Only with you. They sat next to each other. The silence between them was no longer heavy, filled with fear and doubt. Now it was something else, a deep, warm understanding. Alex looked at Jenna, her eyes glowing in the soft light of the night lamp. For the first time in a long time, he did not feel confused within himself. He no longer doubted. So we'll just try it, she asked, tilting her head slightly to the side, studying his face. Alex smiled. He reached for her hand, ran his fingers over her wrist, feeling the slight beat of her pulse. No, he said firmly, we won't just try. We will be together. Jenna laughed quietly, as if she couldn't believe this was happening. She closed her eyes for a moment, as if enjoying these words, and then looked at him again, a hesitant but happy smile touching her lips. I don't know how it will be, she whispered. This is all so strange, so fast. Alex ran his hand over her cheek, tilting his head slightly closer. Nothing strange, Jenna. His voice was soft but confident. I know that I want to be with you. I don't want to lose you again. She shuddered, remembering the weeks spent away from him. Her breathing hitched. Me too. I'm tired of running, tired of doubting. I just want us to be happy. Alex leaned down, his lips touching her forehead. It was not passionate, not hasty, but rather carefully, like a promise. Jenna took his hand in hers and squeezed. Then be with me, he whispered. And she stayed. Their lives began to change. They no longer hid from each other, no longer struggled with feelings, no longer ran away. Everything that had happened before, anxieties, fears, doubts, now seemed to belong to the past. Alex and Jenna spent more and more time together. They had breakfast together, went shopping, watched films, and discussed books. Everything seemed so simple, so natural. Alex found himself now unable to imagine his days without her. One day they were walking in the park, and Jenna, without thinking, took his hand. Alex felt his heart skip a beat. It was a simple gesture, but there was so much tenderness and confidence in it that he realized that now everything was really different. Alex, she called, squeezing his fingers. Are you happy? He looked at her. She looked so beautiful in the sunset light, with a slight blush on her cheeks. Yes, he answered without hesitation. And you? Jenna smiled and snuggled up to him, resting her head on his shoulder. Yes, now yes. And Alex knew that he would never let her go again. Several months have passed. Alex and Jenna were building their lives together, and for the first time in a long time, everything felt right. There was no more fear, doubt, or obstacles. They were just next to each other, and that was enough. But there was one unclosed door in their past. Jenna knew she needed to meet her mother. She put off this conversation for a long time, but one day, on a warm autumn day, she finally dialed Rachel's number. She answered immediately, as if she was waiting for this call. Jenna. The mother's voice was trembling. We need to talk, Jenna said. Personally. Rachel agreed. They met in a small cafe. Jenna was nervous, but when she saw her mother sitting at the table, her eyes tired and her shoulders slumped. Something inside her softened. Thank you for coming, Rachel said quietly. I thought for a long time, Jenna admitted, crossing her arms. At first I hated you. For everything. For the lies, for the pain, for the fear in which you plunged me. I couldn't understand how you could do this. Rachel lowered her eyes, and Jenna saw tears sparkling in the corners of her eyelids. I know. The mother's voice trembled. I made a lot of mistakes, and maybe you'll never forgive me. But know this, I never meant to hurt you. Jenna sighed and looked out the window. Autumn leaves swirled in the air, just like her thoughts. I thought I couldn't forgive you, she said finally. But I don't want to carry this inside me anymore. I'm tired of being angry. And you know what, Mom? I forgive you. Rachel sobbed, covering her face with her hands. For the first time in a long time, Jenna saw in her not a manipulator, not a woman who ruined her life, but simply a person who also suffered. They talked for a long time. About the past, about the future, about pain and forgiveness. When Jenna left the cafe, she felt as if a huge weight had been lifted off her shoulders. She returned home, where Alex was waiting for her. "How did it go?" he asked, looking at her carefully. Jenna smiled, a real, sincere smile. "I let her go, and myself too." Alex took her hand and pulled her closer. "I'm proud of you," he said, looking into her eyes. "You are strong." "No," Jenna shook her head. "I just don't want to live in the past anymore." Alex understood her. He walked this path himself. Years of loneliness, regrets, unresolved problems. But now, looking at Jenna, he felt only one thing: happiness. For the first time in 20 years, he was truly happy. And this was the beginning of their new life. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even click to the next one.